Sophie Lane, a 12-year-old girl living in a worn-down trailer park on the outskirts of Leach, Texas, helped her mother clean a small bakery part-time every morning. Her mother, Joanne, a thin but strong woman, always taught her, "You don't have to be rich to live kindly." Sophie didn't have many friends and was often teased at Winslow Elementary for her old uniform and worn-out shoes. She was quiet and reserved, but her brown eyes held a deep quality, as if carrying songs she only hummed in her mind. When Winslow Elementary announced Talent Week, Sophie decided to sign up. She chose to sing Scarborough Fair, a lullaby her mother used to sing to her when she was sick. Despite hearing giggles and whispers from classmates who thought it would be a comedy act, Sophie didn't cry. She practiced diligently in her room, her voice shaky but clear. Joanne encouraged Sophie, sharing her own past dream of standing on a stage and telling her that seeing Sophie perform would be the most beautiful gift. She also told Sophie to keep singing because the world needs to hear the voices that have never been heard. At the rehearsal, Sophie was the last contestant and chose to sing a cappella. Her bare voice without a microphone or instrument captivated the room, leaving teachers and others in a stunned silence. On the day of the performance, Sophie arrived early, wearing a simple white dress her mother had carefully ironed. Her face was a bit tense, but her eyes were determined, and her mother stood proudly beside her. As she sang Scarborough Fair, her voice rose gentle and sincere. The auditorium, initially filled with whispers, gradually fell silent, captivated by her raw and sincere talent. A music teacher set her pen down, and an elderly parent wiped his eyes, moved by Sophie's heartfelt singing. When the final note faded, a respectful round of applause erupted, followed by a standing ovation from the entire auditorium. Sophie stood in the spotlight, no longer the poor girl who was teased, but a young artist living her dream. Her mother stood proudly in the audience, red-eyed but smiling. After the performance, Clara Jensen, conductor of the City Children's Choir, approached Sophie and invited her for a voice audition for a special scholarship program at Emerson School of Music. With her mother's encouragement, Sophie attended the audition at a professional recording studio in downtown Amarillo. The studio engineer, Leo, was initially surprised, but Sophie's a cappella rendition of Scarborough Fair deeply affected him. He remarked that her voice was not loud or perfect, but it was real and conveyed emotion without forcing it. Clara explained that Scarborough Fair was a lullaby for dreamers, which Sophie's mother often sang. That same afternoon, Clara sent Sophie's recording to the admissions board of Emerson School of Music for a partial scholarship program for young talents from rural areas. 3 weeks later, Sophie received a pale blue envelope with the school's logo offering her full admission to Emerson's Distinguished Summer Scholarship Program in Austin, with all tuition, travel, and lodging expenses fully covered. Sophie felt like she was no longer sitting in the back row for the first time in her life. At Emerson Conservatory, Sophie felt out of place among classmates from prestigious backgrounds who had extensive musical training. She struggled with vocal anatomy, harmony class, and vocal technique. Clara Jensen, who introduced Sophie to the program, reminded her that they sought souls that tell stories through music, and that sometimes the simplest voice is listened to the longest. When Sophie expressed her self-doubt, Clara reassured her, "Technique can be learned. Emotion cannot. You bring something many have forgotten a reason to sing." For her final performance, Sophie chose "You Are My Sunshine," a classic country song her mother used to sing to her. Her heartfelt performance captivated the students and instructors, reminding them why music ever moved them. The final performance took place at Willow Hall Auditorium, attended by parents, musicians, local journalists, and talent scouts. Sophie, in a light blue gown stitched by a teacher, nervously stepped onto the stage. Her mother, Joanne, who had traveled from Leach, sat proudly in the fourth row. As Sophie sang, her voice rose soft and true, each word a story of her life. The auditorium fell silent, deeply moved by her sincerity. In the final line, Joanne stood, hands over her heart, a silent declaration of pride. The audience erupted in thunderous applause, many wiping away tears. Sophie bowed, no longer trembling, knowing she had been seen for being real. The next morning, the Academy Board offered Sophie full admission to the year-round program covering all expenses. When Sophie asked if her mother could come with her, Clara replied that the school would be honored if her mother was the reason she sang so beautifully. Years later, as a renowned singer-songwriter, Sophie credited her mother's unwavering support as the life-changing moment. Story of Isabel Moore. Isabel Moore, a 28-year-old waitress at Rosewood Cafe in Atoria, Oregon, lived a quiet life supporting her younger brother after their parents passed away. Though regulars praised her warm hands and a voice like autumn, few knew she once dreamed of being a singer. She had won a talent show as a child, and her voice, though unrefined, was full of emotion. However, when her mother fell ill, Isabel left music school and her dream was put aside. Her best friend Rachel Mendes, an event coordinator, invited Isabel to a fundraising gala at the Atoria Bay Hotel. Dressed simply, Isabel felt out of place among the glamorous guests. When the guest performer canceled, a tipsy man suggested someone from the room sing. A group of women pointed to Isabel, and despite the subtle mockery, Isabel agreed, stating, "If they want to hear, then I'll sing." Stepping onto the stage without accompaniment, Isabel sang Hallelujah. Her clear, sincere voice, unembellished and rich with depth, silenced the ballroom, with each note carrying memories of her struggles and losses. Her voice became stronger, not in technical precision, but in emotional clarity, storytelling, rather than just performing. By the final verse, there was no mockery left in the room, and the audience gave her a standing ovation that even seasoned professionals rarely receive. Rachel, her friend, was in tears, and the man who had laughed earlier stood speechless. Backstage, Margot Levinson, director of community music programs at the Seattle Philharmonic, approached Isabel, expressing her belief that the audience should have known what they were about to witness. 3 days after the gala, Rachel informed Isabel that Margot had invited her to join the Folk Voice Discovery Project, a summer training program for only 6 people from the entire state without an audition, specifically because they wanted a real voice. Isabel, despite her self-doubt about her lack of a formal training, remembered her mother's words, "You have a voice like a first sunshine of Summerbell. One day the world will stop to listen and accept it." At the Seattle Music Center, among students from prestigious conservatories, Isabel felt inadequate. However, Margot encouraged her, "Don't let what you haven't learned overshadow what you already have." During an impromptu performance, Isabel instinctively sang Wayfaring Stranger, a song her mother used to hum. Her performance, without music or refined technique, resonated deeply, like a story from generations of the poor and humble. Margot stood and stated, "She didn't come here to perform. She came to remind us why music ever mattered." Isabel felt a quiet belief that she truly belonged there. For her final performance at Rainier Hall, Isabel chose Wild Mountain Time, an old folk tune her mother used to sing. It wasn't a song for vocal range, but it carried everything Isabel knew about longing, tenderness, and sacrifice. Dressed in a simple, altered gown and wearing a floral pendant from her mother, Isabel began to sing. Her gentle voice seeped into the hearts of the audience, who were moved by her sincerity. Margot nodded slowly, and Rachel cried as the entire hall fell into a sincere silence. The applause that followed was born from respect, acknowledging that some simple things are irreplaceable. Isabel stood in the spotlight, no longer the shy waitress, but Isabel Moore, carrying a trove of gentle sound. After her performance, Thomas Avery, executive producer of American Soul, a national vocal showcase, approached her, stating her voice didn't belong only in small recital halls, and he wanted her on the next season's show, as they were looking for something real. Isabel knew her dream was finally opening. 2 months later, the first broadcast of American Soul aired, and Isabel Moore became a phenomenon called the voice that feels like home. She declined major studio offers and long-term contracts, instead returning to Oregon to open a small singing class for children at the same old church where she first found her voice. The sign outside read, "Sometimes it's not the loudest voice that makes us listen, but the truest heart."